Hello, today I'm presenting towards critical heritage in the wild, analyzing discomfort through collaborative autoethnography. My name is Paulo and I'm a postdoctoral researcher at ET Larsis, and this work was done with colleagues from ET Larsis, IST, and Umeå University. Heritage are the elements that should be preserved due to its cultural, natural, and historical value. Appraising this value is normally left to experts and organizations like UNESCO, in what is called authorized heritage discourse. Modern heritage has moved away from authorized heritage discourse by embracing other values. Critical heritage acknowledges that heritage needs to be interpreted in the context of current understandings of culture, history, and heritage. Plural heritage acknowledges several perspectives of heritage and allows for different and opposing views. Future-oriented heritage acknowledges that society shapes heritage, but future heritage should also contribute to society. Intersecting heritage and HCI, digital tools have been applied to safeguard heritage in multiple ways, including identification, cataloging, preservation, and curation. Digital tools have also been used for dissemination and education about heritage through various technologies, for example VR and web, and contexts in museums, classrooms, and in the wild. While there is less work on critical heritage in HCI, recent work, for example the Whole Story Project, Sweetgrass AR, Campus AR, overlays digital content in AR to challenge existing narratives and create opportunities for critical heritage. Schofield and colleagues highlight the suitability of HCI design methods in understanding heritage from a critical and future-oriented way. However, spaces for critical heritage should be dependent on intercultural dialogues. European policy agendas actively seek to stimulate intercultural dialogues about heritage, often through digital interventions. A critique of digital interventions is that they adopt a techno-deterministic approach without concern for who is participating and its outcome of technology. Existing digital interventions do not address why intercultural dialogues are difficult to achieve and leave it to the citizens to start and engage in exchanges. Furthermore, digital interventions in the public heritage sites, like through locative media technologies, may not consider the barriers that stop intercultural dialogues. In our design exploration, as we engage in designing digital interventions for intercultural dialogues around public cultural heritage sites, we saw an opportunity to surface multiple interpretations and points of view of history and shine a critical lens on current societal issues. We take inspiration from alternative practices of intercultural dialogue through its inclusion in tourism, visiting as a mode of civic learning, to explore critical heritage in the wild. Our field study is in Lisbon, and following the practice of visiting, we search for intercultural guides which are good company, able to help visit different perspectives and dissonant views of history. In Migrant Tour, intercultural guides are citizen migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers. Tours are created through participatory storytelling and autoethnographic mapping techniques, contesting and broadening local and national heritage discourse. In the African Lisbon tour, our intercultural guide is Naki from Togo, who has lived in Portugal for 7 years. His tour focuses on transatlantic slave trade and colonialism. Collaborative autoethnography was chosen as it best exemplifies the exploration of critical and plural heritages. 6 researchers conducted individual autoethnographic accounts of the tours. Different pairing of researchers ensured multiple perspectives of 3 migrant tours and 1 African Lisbon tour. The tours covered 13 unique locations spread out through downtown Lisbon, with some overlap. During the tour, researchers made notes, drawings, and annotated photos. After each tour, the 6 researchers wrote accounts of the experience and shared them on online documents and whiteboards. After all the tours, data was analyzed collaboratively through diffraction. Diffraction is a metaphor for inquiry inspired by Barad, focused on attending to differences, the specific material entanglements we are a part of, our intersecting identities, and the multiple and often conflicting discursive and material practices that constitute our everyday lives. Agential cuts are active choices of separating the subject and the object. In our analysis, the pooled autoethnographic data was read multiple times over a period of 1 week, with asynchronous commenting on the documents themselves. 5 one-hour workshops were organized to discuss the data, drilling down from more general discussion to potential agential cuts. The results of this analysis are not stable, uniform categories, usually produced by traditional qualitative modes of inquiry, for example thematic analysis, but instead they make the visible patterns of difference on how each researcher experienced aspects of heritage places differently. Given the personal accounts, we report positionality statements in the paper. These statements reflect the diversity of gender, race, supranational, national, subnational identities, migration experience, etc. While we acknowledge the existence of other intersectionality traits, we report on traits that we find relevant to the discussion of intercultural dialogues around heritage. The paper describes several engagements with cultural heritage sites. For each engagement, an historical contextualization is given following the intercultural guide's explanation, followed by a description of the experience from several points of view, and a comparison of the experience highlighting differences and why these were reported. For brevity, we describe here only one of these engagements. St. Dominic Church is a Catholic church built in 1241. Through the migrant tour, we learned that it was the site of the Easter slaughter, where thousands of Jews that converted to Catholicism were lynched in the 16th century. Through the African Lisbon tour, we learned that it was the site of the first black monastery in Europe. The church was rebuilt after 2 earthquakes, but left untouched after a fire. In our descriptions, discomfort was associated with different discursive and material conditions associated with the church. Our accounts talk about the uneasy relationship with Catholic upbringing, the aesthetic quality of the church versus the mark left by the fire as penance, empowering converted slaves versus the control of the African population by the church, and the absence of the Easter slaughter from textbooks. Through our comparison, national cultural heritage sites are often made to create and sustain a national identity. We started our analysis by assuming a unified national identity for most researchers, but our engagements with the church were mostly framed around other local identities or other characteristics that each resulted in distinct, uncomfortable experiences, but that lit a desire to know more about the fates of these communities. Other engagements highlighted different potential agential cuts. Factors of mobility that was unfolded by a researcher's description of his disability, gender or race unfolded by 2 researchers' a description of harassment in the streets of Lisbon during the tour, cultural identity unfolded by the discussions of different levels of nationalism. Discomfort, a common concept in HEI and one which we did not expect to experience, kept appearing during our agential cuts discussions. Our tours have clear parallels of experiencing visceral, cultural, and intimate discomfort, but we define discomfort in a more basic sense, in a way that allows to discuss how bodies are adapted or not to the environment. We take discomfort to be the feeling at odds with the environment. As Sarah Ahmed writes, to be comfortable is to be at ease with one's environment that is hard to distinguish, where one body's ends and the world begins. We adopt discomfort as an agential cut to discuss its application to critical cultural heritage. Through our tours, discomfort was clearly used as a resource for designing critical cultural heritage. The familiarization and disorientation, coming from being exposed to different angles of history, caused mild discomfort, but also willingness to learn. The degree of discomfort, or in other words, the degree of feeling at odds with the information given to us, was related to how much we felt connected to the Portuguese identity and history. Focusing on subnational identities and locally relevant histories and its intersections might be a better path. Guides employed provocation and inquiry to both sustain interest and stimulate critical reflection, for example, prompting for opinions or pointing out gaps in knowledge. At times, tours involved physically experiencing the weight of history, such as when climbing 235 steps, representing the 235 slaves sold in the first auction. Our accounts also reflect how discomfort can be a hindrance for designing critical heritage. Heritage sites are not neutral spaces for engaging in intercultural dialogues, as there are inequalities in occupying different places. One highlighted pattern of difference was the physical discomfort of moving through the city and the preparation it entails. One implication of considering mobility discomfort, not being able to move unproblematically through the site, is to consider the extra work required by people as they are invited to engage with the heritage site. There is an opportunity to design the space of preparation for visiting, one that considers the physical characteristics of the places. Another highlighted pattern of difference was the discomfort caused by the cultural identity and gender. Engagement with different heritage sites made us aware that the way the sites are built, maintained, and frequented by different people can result in them being perceived as male, white, and sometimes, rarely in this particular context, black. When designing for critical locative media in public heritage sites, we call for designers to account for how different bodies, especially with regards to race and gender, may feel in or out of place when visiting heritage sites, as this has implications for who gets to visit and participate in critical heritage dialogues. Our full paper also discusses the ethics of discomfort by analyzing how guides behave as good hosts, and the methodological implications and limitations of using collaborative autoethnography and diffractive analysis. In conclusion, our work, as a contribution to cultural heritage, we demonstrate the usefulness of doing autoethnography with a critical cultural heritage stance, where the emphasis on bodies and the relationships to the material semiotic conditions of heritage sites are taken as a starting point for the design. As a contribution to HEI, our design exploration surfaces embodies aspects related to discomfort. Notably, our articulation of discomfort highlights how different facets of discomfort can be resources or hindrances when designing critical heritage tools. Finally, we contribute to the growing HEI body of work on collaborative autoethnography and diffraction with methodological implications which can be useful for other HEI researchers exploring patterns of difference in an entangled world.